Hello everybody and welcome back to the Family Meal Podcast. My name is Grace. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I am so thrilled and excited to be talking about one of my favorite topics to discuss when it comes to the restaurant industry, and that is tipping. Tips and gratuity. Leaving a tip for your server. Don't forget to tip your waitresses. This is a very I feel like it's a hot button issue. And I'll say why. I'll tell you why. I think most of the population who has never worked in the restaurant industry has absolutely no idea why you're supposed to tip, what tipping does, and why you need to not be a jerk about it sometimes. Anyway, so I'm sure you've seen in your time on the internet, I'm sure you have seen countless videos where like people will leave like $5 on the table, like 5 singles on the table, and they'll tell waitresses like, every time you mess up, I shouldn't have done that with a southern accent. That's rude. Every time you do something wrong, I'm going to take one off. And that's like, you know, how you'll know you're doing a bad job. So let's start with the basics. Let's start with the basics of tipping from the restaurant industry perspective. So in case you didn't know, because you've never been a server or worked in that capacity, servers make like $2 an hour. Yeah, I make $2 an hour on paper. Now, there's an agreement between servers and their employees, or servers and their managers, pardon, that if I, in a given night, let's say I was working, and yes, my base wage is $2.30 an hour or something. But the idea is, well, but you get tips, and that should compensate out to about minimum wage, or if not more. But if for whatever reason I worked an 8-hour shift or something, and I did not, nobody came to the restaurant, just 0 people came in, my employer would pay me minimum wage. But it's assumed, well, you're going to make tips, so you will make minimum wage and more. So it's a little bit of like a backhanded, like, well, you don't need to be paid more because you're going to make tips, and that should equal out to at least minimum wage. So it's a little backhanded, but you know what? Roughly, you're probably making like $12 or $14 an hour. So let's say that's what I'm actually take home in my pay. But my base rate is $2 an hour. Okay, that's if you're a server. This is obviously contingent on the restaurant. I just want to preface with that. So some restaurants treat like their back waiters and their food runners differently, which if you're not aware what those are different positions. So like if you have the person who comes to your table and is like, hi, my name is Grace, I'm going to be taking care of you tonight. What can I get you anything to drink? The person who takes your order, the person who kind of checks in with you frequently, who talks to you the most, they're your server, right? And then there might be other people who work there who clear dirty dishes off your table or who actually bring out your food. That might be your server as well, but there might be other people you see running around that aren't really taking care of one table. They're kind of helping out. Those might be back waiters. They might be food runners. So those are just all other positions. Those positions tend to make either they make minimum wage as a base rate and a very small percentage of what the servers make in tips, like maybe 5%, 10%, something like that. Or they just make, $10 an hour, a little bit over minimum wage, and they get no percentage of the tip. It varies. Again, it very much varies from place to place. So I've worked in places where like the back waiters and food runners get a flat percentage from each server. So like if I had made $100 that night, I had to give 10% to my back waiter. So I would take out 10% and give it to them. And each server had to do that, but it is contingent on the restaurant. So anyway, that's part of where your tip goes. So let's run it back. Let me say that one more time in a very simple way. Your tip is not extra money in my pocket. It's not a present. It's my basic minimum wage, pretty much. It's maybe a little bit more, but it's not like I'm making $30 an hour because you tipped me $30, okay? It's pretty much minimum wage. Okay? It's maybe a little bit more, but it's probably not. So let's get that out of the way. It's not a cute little gift you're giving me. It's not me being greedy and wanting more money because, well, you make minimum wage and now I'm supposed to tip you on top. It's not that. Okay? So let's just say that. Now, that's just me personally as a server. But let's look at the restaurant as a whole. Again, restaurants are different, but they tend to fall into either two categories. Either they're a tip pool house, meaning that all of the servers put all of their tips that they make in a pool and it gets divided evenly among them, and then some back waiters and food runners would get a portion of that as well. Or it's individual. So like if you at your table, I'm your server, you tipped me $30, I put that $30 in my pocket, and yeah, I might have to tip some out to back waiters and food runners, but I get that money. It goes to me. I make the tips based off the tables I served that night. So it's there's nothing wrong with either one. Both have their pros and cons. I mean, if you're a person who really likes to make a lot of money, you probably don't want a tip pool, because you probably just want to jam as many tables through your section as you possibly can. And if you're in a tip pool house, you might feel like you get a little bit less money, but also you could probably have less tables and make money as if you worked more tables. So, it's all dependent. At my particular restaurant I'm at now, we have a tip pool. We find that works really well for us because we don't turn tables. It's a weird situation, meaning that for those who are unaware, I want to make sure I don't just like blast over terminology that I think of as like normal. So when I say turning tables, I mean like if you sit at table 1 at 5:30, we open at 5:30 and we close at 8, you can sit at table 101 or table 1 from 5:30 until 8 p.m. And even if you left before 8 p.m., no one would come in and fill that seat. So if I have 4 tables in the section that I'm working, I'm only going to have 4 tables all night. I'm not going to have, a second round of them. So it's like I have 8 tables or I have 12 tables. That's not going to happen. So it works well for us to have a tip pool because we're not going to be able to turn a lot of tables and have a lot of people in our sections. So if we have a pool, it encourages us to help one another, because if I see that you're struggling in your section, I'm going to be like, oh, well, let me go help you because I'm bored and I'm not busy. I can help you, and then you'll make a nice tip, and then I will also benefit from you making a nice tip. So it encourages like teamwork and encourages you all working together as a team. So I'm a big fan of tip pools, but I know not everybody is, and I totally understand why. You got to make your rent payments somehow. I get it. All right. I'm not here to judge. So anyway, so that's the background info you need on tipping. So I also want to say this that I've always wanted to say. I think people don't realize how when you're always dealing with the same menu and you're always dealing with the same prices and you're always dealing with the same, like roughly the same totals, like at the end of the night for a lot of your tables, like, pretty much I know what your bill is going to come out to if you both order an appetizer, you both get an entree, and you get two cocktails or maybe 2 glasses of wine, and then you split a dessert. I know almost off the top of my head what your bill is going to be. Therefore, I know when you tip on the before tax. Don't try me, okay? I know. And to all the people, okay. I'm very heated about this topic, but you're allowed to tip on the before tax, and I'm not going to think you're a jerk about it, because etiquette wise, you're very much allowed to tip on the before tax. I mean, it's fine. I can't really hate you for that, okay? And I can't be like, ooh, you're a jerk. Because, it's usually it's like $3. So, really? But I'm making $2 an hour. You can't just give me the $3. But sometimes I'm like, you know what? Okay, it's fine. I'll allow it. Whatever. It was $10 because it was a big bill. It's fine. I'll allow it. But I just want you to know that every server knows when you do that, okay? I just want you to know that you're not being slick. Your servers know. They know exactly what you did. And they're not happy about it, okay? So if you can live with yourself knowing that you tipped on the before tax and that made you feel good about yourself, but your server looked at that and went, oh, you really had to, then fine. Continue to do it. Live your best life. Save that money. I'm not judging you. You probably have a healthier savings account than I do. But just know that we know. Just know that I'm very aware. Just know that I know when you tip 18%. Just know that I know, okay? Easy, basic rule of thumb is 20%, okay? It's not that hard. A lot of checks now tell you what 20% is, so you can just add it automatically. And that's, again, it's not you giving me like this nice present, okay? It's me making minimum wage. That's how I get to minimum wage, you know? Maybe it's a couple extra bones thrown my way, but you know what? I'd like to think I did a nice job. You know, I'm not asking you to tip me 30%. That would be a lot, but you know, just 20 is all I ask, and I'm happy, and I'm like, great, thank you, appreciate you, come back soon. I had somebody, actually just a couple nights ago, I brought them their bill, and we have live entertainment now on some of our nights when we're open for dinner. So those nights are therefore a little bit more expensive because you're paying for a cabaret evening. So you're getting, for the one price, you're getting dinner and a show, right? So you get like an appetizer and an entree, and you get to see the show. And so it's like you're buying basically dinner and a ticket. So it's a little bit more expensive than our nights that don't have entertainment. Now, when I say a little bit more expensive, okay, just let's say, I won't tell you what the base price of dinner is, okay? But think about how much a 2-course dinner might cost you at a nice restaurant, okay? Not super bougie, but a nice restaurant. And let's say the ticket to see the show is $30 addition to that. And that's what you pay to get in. That's not including if you have some wine or you order dessert or something like that, okay? Okay. So I brought this bill over to this table, and that was a table of 4. They had, I think, 2 rounds of cocktails, or like 1.5 rounds of cocktails, and they didn't have dessert, and a couple of them had ordered some of the appetizers that cost a little bit more money because the ingredients are a little bit more expensive. So, and when I say a little bit, that I mean like $5 extra. So I brought them a bill, and it just shows you when you use Square and you are presenting the bill to someone, it just shows you the total of what your bill was. And I offer to people sometimes, you know, if you want to see an itemized copy of the bill, I can get it for you. Don't worry about it. But the woman who was paying for it, they asked me, oh, how do I tip? They said, how do I tip? And I said, oh, you know, when you swipe your card, it gives you an option to add your tip and gratuity for us. And they said, oh, and this card on the table is how we tip the performers, right? Because the performers manager had put some cards on the table that had like a Venmo address so that people could tip her. And I said, yes, if you want to tip our lovely performer tonight, you can use that Venmo card and you can send a tip to her directly. I said, but this on your bill is a tip for the wait staff. And she said, so she looked at me and said, well, what percentage of what we paid was for the food? And I just looked at her like I was like, I'm not answering this question, because if I tell you that like, well, the $70 you paid, $40 was for food and the $30 was for entertainment, she's going to tip me on half the bill. And I just don't think you understand okay, it's like, it was probably like a $300 table. Okay. So you have to understand that like, that's a $60 tip. And if I got tipped 10% on that bill, I would have been in so much trouble. Like because again, we're in a tip pool house. So that means I would have lost everybody $30, which like, granted, there's like 6 of us. So like it would have been $5 each, but it's the principle of the thing. And it would have been like really heartbreaking. And I just don't think most people understand that. So yeah, I wasn't going to answer that question. So I just looked at her for a minute. And thankfully one of the other people at the table was like, oh, no, just tip 20% on that bill, and then I'll send a tip to the performer. And she's like, I know, but I want to know how much of this bill is the food and how much of it is for the performer. And I said, well, the performer doesn't get, like, I didn't know how to say, like, well, you know, you're paying the restaurant right now. Like, the performer's paid. She gets paid by the sponsors. She doesn't get paid by, and it's not really the sponsors, but she gets written a check by somebody else. That has nothing to do with us. You know, this is for what we did tonight for you. And I understand that. I didn't say most of that. I just stood there because I was like, I'm not telling you how much was quote unquote for the food and how much was quote unquote for the entertainment, because then you were going to tip me half. Yeah, I would have lost my mind. So I didn't say anything. And she did, to her credit, she did tip me 20%. They had a nice time. they left. But that did scare the bejesus out of me. Oh, and I guess this is one more fun fact I'll throw in there about tipping. So because of COVID, we now can no longer, at my restaurant, we are no longer accepting cash because cash is dirty. So now the only way that you can leave a tip is by leaving one on your credit card. So that's like when you hand me your credit card to pay your bill, and in normal times, and I would swipe it, and then I would bring back to you like the little thing where you sign and you add your tip. Like that's the only way you can tip now. Instead of saying you would normally do that and you would write 0 on that piece of paper and then maybe leave cash as your tip. So when you tip in cash, I take that money and either I put it in the tip pool, or if it's a tip pool house, and if it's not a tip pool house, I put it in my pocket and I go home and I take it home. And the good thing about when you do that, and why in normal times you should always tip your servers in cash, is because I don't get taxed on that. I don't get taxed on that through like my paycheck. I take that home and I get all $30 that you just tipped me. Now, when you tip me $30 or something on a credit card, I maybe lose like $2. I mean, it's not a big deal. Do not feel bad if you tip on the credit card. At least you tipped. But it's certainly not an issue. But now, because we can't accept cash, all tips need to be done on credit cards. So over the course of working 5 days a week for several weeks, I think I'm on week 6 now, having all my tips done on credit cards, I'm losing a little bit of money. I don't want to sound too like, oh, I've lost so much money, because it's not that much, but I'm losing a little bit of money. Now that's obviously made up for the fact when somebody tips me a little bit extra, or somebody's just nice to me and like, it's like, oh, I'll give you a couple extra dollars. Like, obviously that's pretty much compensated for. But under normal circumstances, that's why you should always tip your service staff in cash, because they will not have to get taxed on that. So they get all the money that you've tipped them instead of some of it being taken out. Now that does, crucial note, when I do get tipped in cash, I do still have to tip out to my other back waiters and food runners, right? So I don't exactly just take it home and pocket it like I said before, but I do give some of that to them. So it's not that, it's still not all of it goes to me, but more of it, let's just say it that way, more of it goes to me than when you tip on your credit card. But it's really, in most cases, it's kind of negligible, but it is nice to do. And whenever I see somebody do that, I often think like, that's someone who either kind of knows, or it's just somebody who understands that, like, if I leave you cash, you get to keep all of it, which I appreciate. I did have one guy who felt bad for me when I told him he couldn't tip me in cash. He's like, but you're going to get taxed on it. And I was like, I appreciate you so much, but there's nothing I could do about it. But thank you. I appreciate your concern for my financial well-being. So yeah, I think that's where we're going to leave it today. I hope you've learned a little bit about tipping. I hope this maybe changes your perspective a little bit the next time you go to leave a tip. Whenever you have a nice server, somebody you feel like is really doing their job, tipping them 25%, it doesn't make a huge dent in your wallet, and it really does. I can't even tell you how good I feel about myself when I get a 25% tip. I'm always like, wow, thank you. That's so nice of you, because just that little bit, then it's actually, like, it's funny how I said, like, when you tip 20%, it's not like a present, it's just me making minimum wage, but when you tip me 25%, I'm like, wow, you gave me such a nice little present, and it's literally probably $5 extra. So tip an extra 5% and make a server's day. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in to today's podcast. Hope you learned a little bit something. I hope that this has given you a new perspective on how you tip your servers. Please remember to be kind to your service industry workers during this time, and always be safe and be careful out there in this crazy world we live in. And I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to tip your waitresses. Bye-bye. Wait, that one.